Take two.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So we're going to talk about a record that's a little different than anything we've covered. Back on the show, I want to say I guess you're not technically the first returning guest. I've had maybe one other that's not a regular co-host that's been on for 1 or 2 episodes. But this is the first time. You're the first person to come from being on the internet to being in person. Aaron, welcome.
Yes, I am real.
You are real. Yeah. Now I can finally prove it.
There used to be a way to stick it to the man. It was called rock and roll. But guess what? Oh no, the man ruined that too with a little thing called MTV.
Don't talk to me about rock and roll. I'm not there in the clubs and on the streets, and I'm living it. I am rock and roll.
Did I listen to pop music because I was miserable? Or was I miserable because I listened to pop music?
We're going to talk about the new album from Architects called Holy Hell. And in take 1, I was saying that it's not going to be part of the whole like King's Court sort of thing with Bearings being our current champ. They're just so very different that I figured, you know what, this is going to be basically a one-off review / discussion. I don't know if what I do is actually even reviewing things.
Yeah, just talking about
yeah, basically, like I don't
critiquing.
when I read or like listen to other people's reviews of things, I'm like, man, I mostly do not go into that kind of depth. I'm just like, I just want to talk about music. So Holy Hell by Architects, and I was familiar with Architects as far as like a band and that they existed, but I'd never really listened to them. I was familiar with the story that inspired a lot of the lyrics on this album, that being the death of their guitar player, who, if I understand correctly, is the brother or twin brother of
the drummer. Yeah.
Is it the drummer? Okay, yeah. Because you had sent a YouTube video, which I didn't get to see the whole thing, but where they talk a lot about the story. It's called Holy Ghost, I think.
Yeah.
So if you're listening to this episode right now and you say never heard Architects, but you liked the first little bit that you heard, unless you're listening on YouTube, then you didn't get to hear any music. But look it up, Architects Holy Ghost. I watched, it's about 20 minutes, I want to say. Yeah. I probably watched 10 to 12 minutes or so before I got interrupted and then had to move on and forgot about it. But it was really awesome, especially if you like kind of the background of how things are made and the story to this one being fairly unique.
Yeah.
So let's get into the album. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, they're one of those bands that, I've known of kind of since from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them live, but I've never really like dug into their records a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know for what reason that is. Like I've listened to them all, but haven't necessarily gone back to them a lot.
Yeah.
But with this one, the songs they released were awesome. And I was interested to kind of hear just kind of the transition with a new guitar player was. And it's such a good record.
Yeah.
It's such a great mix of heavy, but it's not super repetitive. It doesn't feel like every song kind of sounds the same. There's really good breaks in the songs with, not atmospheric, but, like some synths and just enough to kind of break the songs up. Yeah. Lots of super catchy choruses. Yeah, I really enjoyed the album.
There were, I was drawn in, I guess, in a similar sense with kind of like those lead singles or whatever that they had released. And I was kind of going, oh, okay. Like I like to describe it as like there being a lot of wide open spaces on this album. Because there are specific parts where I'm like, I feel like I'm just standing in like an open field sort of deal. And like this, which is a really weird description, but just like the music sort of surrounding, because it gets so wide open, and it is really neat. I did have a few kind of nitpicks with the record. All in all, I thought it's pretty good. It's very listenable.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, being the genre that it is, it's not going to be for everyone. I'm not going to tell my mom to listen to Architects, right? But maybe she'd love it. Who knows? But it is very listenable, and but the kind of like nitpick sort of things were in the vocals for one. His like he does a really good job of like this singing, screaming mix. It's like listening to it, I'm like, it's gotta be layered vocals, or he's just like he's got this very unique voice, but it does, I feel like it just gets used maybe a little too much for my liking. Like having said that, it doesn't turn me off from the album. I think maybe I would just appreciate a little more balance between just the straight up singing and that, because when you feel like it's going to go into this huge like hook for a chorus, and it does, one of these times I would just like him to actually just be singing verses like that. I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah. You see, my opinion is almost opposite of that.
Yeah.
I thought it really stood out because it didn't have the typical, metalcore scream and then sing chorus.
Yeah.
But yeah, I get what you mean. Like when he's the only one doing vocals, and
it's really unique.
Yeah.
Right. And when I first heard it, I think the thing was, I was like, oh, this is awesome. And then I was like, that's almost the only way he sings, except when it really gets quiet.
Right.
Then he kind of, I'm assuming it's the same vocalist, opens up and sings, right? And I wouldn't want them to necessarily take that away and just like replace that with singing. I think in my, like for my ear, I was just kind of like looking for a little more of a mix, I suppose.
Fair.
But all in all, though, it is a very, very listenable record. The only other nitpick I really had were some of like the string placements. There were a few times where I was like, I don't know if the strings were necessary there.
Yeah.
But then other points where I was like, ooh, this sounds really nice.
Yeah.
So yeah, and those are, for me, those are like very minor things, because neither one of those issues were like to the point where I was like, please just change that.
Yeah.
Just like I wouldn't mind if he sang a little, because he's got a nice singing voice too, right? So, but so with this record, it's funny because what I really appreciated as well is, I don't even know what you can, like, is this a metalcore record? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess.
Like,
I don't know what else you'd.
I mean, I guess like
gent.
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely some gent elements.
Yeah.
But
even with that, I found it was way more listenable. Like a lot of those gent bands, like I just can't handle it, because it's just all the riffs kind of sound the same.
Yeah.
But I thought these ones were really tasteful for the parts they had. It sounded unique.
Yeah.
It didn't just go on for the whole song, that part.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I thought that part sounded really good.
And I was gonna say, like, we reviewed a number of months ago now the latest August Burns Red record.
Yeah.
And that one I described it as being and feeling like an assault on my senses sort of deal, right? Like, because it was just like very much from the get-go, it just felt like it just knew one volume sort of deal, which is fine. But with this record, I was thinking about it at one point. I was like, oh, I never got to that point where I was like, any of this is like just too much in your face, because I think the way you put it, like, when they're playing specific riffs, like just doing things sort of tastefully and sparingly, and not just kind of being like, oh, we're gonna do this here because this is what we're supposed to do, right?
Yeah, everything was placed really well.
Yeah, outside of maybe breakdowns, like the breakdowns were all pretty consistent as far as like I felt anyways where they would come, but again, like that's when I find, like with me anyways, when I'm listening to this kind of music, I'm waiting for the breakdown, right? Where I'm just like, all right, and drop, and there it is, and it's a lot of fun. But I texted you, I was like, at the time I hadn't actually fully listened to the record yet, but I was like, I think I said, I feel like I'm going to be mean mugging a lot while I'm listening to this. I'm just like driving around, just nice. But so, yeah, I mean, I don't think we really do ratings on the show anymore, so I don't know. You said you really liked the record though.
Yeah, when I got to the end of it, I wasn't ready for it to be over. Right. There wasn't any parts where I was like, okay, I'm ready for the next song. Like, the whole album, and again, like, I'm a big fan of this kind of music. Yeah. And so, but when the end came, I was like, man, like, that was an awesome record.
Let's do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm excited to listen to it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's tons of catchy parts, like super cool drumming with guitaring, and so I'm really excited to go back again and listen to it a bit more. And also, like, lyrically, there's a lot to kind of take from it. Like, obviously it's a heavy content lyrically, but I didn't find it like while it was heavy, it still felt kind of hopeful. Right. And they kind of talked about that in the Holy Ghost documentary too, how just you can come out of something so heavy as the death of one of the members and still kind of feel hope for the future, the things to come. And
definitely. I picked that up in a few different spots on the record too. Like they didn't, like, I guess, just sit and like dwell in the heaviness too much, right? And especially when it's, not only like, I mean, it's a member of the band, obviously, but for one of them, it was a brother, right? Like somebody grew up with. And I'm like, I can only imagine. And I remember hearing about the story about them like continuing to tour and all this stuff. And I often wonder, like, if I was in a band and I went through something like that, like, would you? I mean, I guess part of it probably depends on what role they played in the band, right? Like how easily
he was
you
the
can.
main songwriter. Too,
yeah, like that's a huge thing. But yeah, to like just pick up and keep going. But like I don't know anything about. Was his name Tom or was his brother's name Tom?
I think his name was Tom. The drummer's Dan. Could
have done more research on my end, but hey. But yeah, like. I don't know him at all, obviously, but it seems like they were like, no, this is what he'd want us to kind of keep going. Not just be like, all right, moving on, right? Yeah. But like keep pushing forward because I think he was so much a part of that band. Like, so I think that's pretty cool. And I definitely enjoyed the record. It was refreshing in the sense that most of the stuff, obviously, that we've covered on the show is just like pop punk and within that umbrella. And I've always wanted to kind of branch out a little bit. It just most of the time, like those, like I definitely went through phases where I listened to heavier music and whatever, but it's not something that stuck with me as much. So I still go back to some of those older bands, and then sometimes there's a band that comes out and I'm like, like I do really like this, but it's not necessarily a genre or subgenre of music I've followed too closely these days. So it's nice to kind of have someone bring something up and be like, oh, this is coming out, oh, I should check it out, and then for them to be able to like to do something that I find is different. I would definitely say this is a record to recommend to people that maybe they enjoy some heavy music, maybe don't follow a ton of it, there's a lot to be taken from this there
album.
is it's pretty fantastic. So I think we're obviously both in agreement that it's a good record. This episode's a little shorter than most, but hey, we're gonna release a couple this week, so it's fine. You get to listen to some back to back. But so I was just about to say this was by the Contortionist, because for whatever reason, this record reminded me of the Contortionist. It is not. It is Architects in Holy Hell. So I would definitely recommend checking it out if you've never listened to Architects and you have any sort of interest in kind of heavier music. It's worth your time.
Definitely.
So that's going to wrap this episode up, but you can, find us on all the social networks sort of stuff, facebook.com/music to my peers. You can, I actually sent out a tweet the other day, I think, on music, which I hadn't used the Music to My Peers Twitter in forever. But that's at Music to My Peers. I don't even remember what it is. At David to My Peers on Instagram, and musicpeers.blogspot.com if you want to find kind of the hub of it all. But that is gonna do it.